What up, Trinity Youth? It's your boy Rico coming in live, sort of, with a virtual teaching. And as always, I have a question for you. Have you ever felt labeled or misunderstood or judged? I can think of a few times, but one that's recurring is when people see me, they see my name, they think Latino, and they think, you like spicy food. And the reality is that I don't like spicy food. Even if I wanted to try to live into the stereotype, wherever it came from, it would be pretty obvious that I don't do spicy food. I start sweating, I kind of turn red, I start coughing and hiccuping. It's not pretty. There's a scene in the show The Office. I love that show. If you know me, you know that. My wife and I watch it all the time. And Andy Bernard meets D'Angelo Vickers. It's in season 7 when Michael Scott's on his way out. And Andy says something kind of funny and quirky when he meets D'Angelo, and instantly D'Angelo slaps Andy with a funny guy label. He says, office funny guy. We all need one of those. And so Andy spends the rest of the episode trying to figure out how to kind of keep the label, but, was clearly not having a good time. He learned kind of the hard way that D'Angelo Vickers really likes slapstick comedy. And so Andy was kind of forced to pour hot coffee on himself and run into tables and trip and even drink soap at one point. And it was clear that D'Angelo was loving it, but Andy was hating it. And he even turns to the camera at one point and says, I guess this is my life now. And, sometimes that can happen when we either get labeled or when we put labels on each other. And if we're honest with ourselves, we tend to do that. We tend to either do anything to fit in because we want to belong, or we tend to slap labels on people or judgments on people especially when they're different than us, because we kind of want to make sense of the world. We want to control them. When people see me, they think Latino and they think, spicy food lover. D'Angelo Vickers saw Andy and labeled him office funny guy. And Jesus also dealt with being labeled. Throughout the Gospels, we see how he continually had to deal with the different labels that his haters, his followers, his fans put on him. For example, his haters labeled him as a drunkard and a glutton. His closest friends labeled Jesus as a political liberator. They wanted him to come and fix all their problems. Another label that his haters had for him was blasphemer and heretic. And lastly, his fan club, even Jesus' fan club, labeled him as a magic miracle man that would just multiply bread and fish and kind of just do amazing things. And so this month we've been looking at the I am statements. And basically those statements are the way that Jesus navigated the labels that people put on him so that he could clarify for people who he really was. When Jesus made these statements, he wanted to communicate at least 3 things. Not just who he was, but who God really is. And Jesus was also trying to communicate through these I am statements how his hearers, his followers, us, were to live in this world and relate to others and relate to God in light of the things that Jesus said about God and about himself. And so today we're going to look at the I am statement, I am the good shepherd. Jesus says it in the Gospel of John, and I'm going to read the passage and you can follow along. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. The worker who is paid to keep the sheep is different from the shepherd. The paid worker does not own the sheep, so when he sees a wolf coming, he runs away and leaves the sheep alone. Then the wolf attacks the sheep and scatters them. The man runs away because he is only a paid worker. He does not really care for the sheep. I am the shepherd who cares for the sheep. I know my sheep just as the Father knows me, and my sheep know me just as I know the Father. I give my life for these sheep. Jesus compares the good shepherd with the worker who is paid. Did you notice that? He says the worker who is paid to keep the sheep is different from the shepherd. He does not really care for the sheep. I am the shepherd who cares for the sheep. That's what Jesus says about himself. By saying I am the good shepherd, Jesus is saying, I am someone who will give his all, who will go the distance, who will sacrifice myself for the good of those in my care. I love those who are in my care. You and I are those in the care of Jesus. He's thinking about you and me in these words. Jesus is saying to us, I care about you so much. You are so important to me. You matter so much to me. You are worth every drop of blood, sweat, and tears. Jesus in this passage is also painting a picture of the kind of relationship he enjoys with God. And he says that so that we can envision a similar relationship to God. He says, I know my sheep just as the Father knows me, and my sheep know me just as I know the Father. I give my life for these sheep. Jesus is saying to us, I want you and me to be so tight with each other. If you get to know me the way that I know God, you will also know God. You were created to experience the presence of God in the same way that you enjoy the presence of a loved one or a friend. It's like Jesus is holding up a mirror when he says these I am statements. When he says, I am the good shepherd, he is showing us what God is really like. He's asking us to look in the mirror, and that's what we see, God. God is a good shepherd. And he also wants us to see him in the reflection, in the mirror. He wants us to know that Jesus is a good shepherd. And he also wants us to see how we are to live based on what he's saying, based on these descriptions of himself and of God, the good shepherd. Jesus didn't do what he did and say what he said just so we could feel comforted and peaceful at church or at Summer Quest or at Huddle. Those are good things, but they're not all that there is. Jesus did what he did and said what he said so that by following him, we could reflect the same kind of love and light to the world, just like that mirror. And that brings me to our so what for today. Jesus is our good shepherd. Sorry. Jesus is our good shepherd so we can be good shepherds for others. Through his I am statements, Jesus is saying, here's me and here's God. But he's also saying, not just here's me and here's God, but he's also saying, here's you. Now go and do likewise. Through his I am statements, Jesus is also telling us who we really are. And as we live into who we really are, we start to live the abundant life that Jesus talks so much about. Jesus, the good shepherd, was always serving and giving of himself to those around him. Eventually, that path led him to the cross, the ultimate sacrifice. And all of that so that we, you and me, can do the same. Serve others, sacrifice for others, and help others know they are seen and valued and loved. Which brings us to my now what for today. Who can you serve? Who can you build up? Who can you cherish? What can you do? What can you say to those around you and do for those around you that will help them, build them up, and make them feel deeply valued? As I say these things, who are you thinking about? Maybe your teammates, family members, classmates, neighbors, people in your social media network, people you see around but you don't really know that well, people who are left out, people who've left you out, people that you've maybe left out, people you admire, people you disdain. How can you serve them? How can you help them with their goals in life? How can you be a part of someone's flourishing? How can you let someone know that you see them, that they are not alone, that they aren't too weird to hang out with? What would it look like if we at Trinity Youth continued to try to live this way? What would it look like if we helped each other live this way in our community? You know, if Jesus were giving this talk today, I don't think that he would say to us, I am the good shepherd. I think the reality is that most of us have never met a sheep or a shepherd. And so we can't really relate to I am the good shepherd, but we can relate to the heart of this statement. So my guess is that if Jesus were with us today, he would say something like, I am the good coach, or I am the good teacher. We can all spot a teacher or a coach who's just in it for the money or the wins, right? They burn us out. They don't really inspire us to love the subject or the sport. Hopefully you've had a teacher or a coach who clearly loves the game or the subject that they teach and loves their students and loves their players. It's as if they don't really care about the test or the wins or the game. They care more about who their students are becoming. And that's what Jesus is like. He's a good coach. He's a good teacher. He cares so deeply about the people we are becoming. He cares so much more about the follower rather than the activities done for Jesus. Of course, that doesn't mean that he doesn't care what we do, but Jesus is a love that is shame-free, pressure-free, ultimatum-free. Jesus is the good shepherd, the good coach, the good teacher who inspires us to do more through the great love and acceptance and purpose that he offers us. And so may we learn to relate to Jesus, our good shepherd, our good coach, our good teacher. May we learn to receive his care for us. May we enjoy the deep relationship that he offers to us. May we learn to be like him toward those around us. May we find creative ways to serve others, to build others up, and to help them feel cherished. Trinity Youth, we've got what it takes, so let's do it. Amen.